All right. So, hi guys. Today we have Rachitt Shah with us, and he is basically cleared both GSoC and GSoD. So, GSoC is basically Google Summer of Code, and GSoD is Google Season of Dogs, right? So, do you want to give an introduction about yourself, Rachit?
Yep. Hi everyone. So I'm Rachitt. I'm a second year from VIT Pune. I'm a growth associate at Grad Capital, which is a student-led venture capital firm, and I'm doing GSoC at Open Astronomy and GSoD at the Stellar Group. And yeah, I like venture capital, product management, and tech. And thank you very much, Sahaj, for having me on board. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here as well. I mean, we have been connected on WhatsApp for a while now, on various WhatsApp groups, but we haven't really personally connected. So through this video, it's a great chance to properly connect with each other, and I'm really glad that you are here with me. So starting with the questions, right? So my first question is, you are into venture capital, but I'm not sure many techies or many college students really know about it. So could you just give a brief up?
Yep. So venture capital is a form of private equity investment. So in venture capital, there is a term known as a limited partner, which is a mostly a pension fund or an endowment fund or government entities. So these limited partners give their money to you for management. So it comes down to the VC firms. So in the VC firms, there are mainly it's among partners who pitch their or investment theses to the limited partners. Then the fund size is given by the limited partners for the general partners to invest in startups. So every venture capital firm has a different thesis, a different fund size, different objectives. So mainly I work at Grad Capital. We are student centric. Talk to we want to invest in student startups who are and into founders who are just coming out of college. So, and venture capital is what do we call a highly fluid environment because it is a collection of people who are highly curious, but there's no one path into venture capital. So it's a very diverse space.
Okay, so that's pretty great. I mean, specifically the part that you guys are into investing in people who are just coming out of the colleges. So like, I really like that idea about grad capital. And overall, it's great to see that you are in the second year of college, and you are into a lot of things. Like, I went through your LinkedIn, and I could really see a lot of communities and internships that you have done, and those were not just into the tech, right? So they were diversified, like they were into growth hacking, or they were into tech as well, and some other stuff. So like, what's your idea? Like, why are you into a lot of things at the same time?
Yeah. So I mean, this I can relate this to curiosity. So I don't like to restrict myself to one thing because but tech is generic. Tech, if you take anyone out of an undergrad program, half the people are into tech.
Hmm.
And I think that tech is just a tool to solve business problems. I mean, if we look at product management, you need to understand users. If you look at growth hacking or communities, you need to monetize your product to sell it to the users. You need to develop a community around it. If you look at venture capital pushes your idea to an actual unicorn. So
Hmm.
I want to get the idea of the whole ecosystem surrounding tech because being a software engineer is just a part of it. The actual magic happens when your product is shipped out of your command line and into the real world. So that was my whole motivation. And personally, I'm a huge fan of communities because communities teach you everything you need to know. You meet amazing people like I'm meeting you right now.
Yeah.
So those things.
Exactly. So like, as I could hear you out, so it was sounding like a person who is going to be a upcoming startup founder. I'm not like having any doubts that you will surely be having your own startup soon. So is that the case right now? Like, are you already into your own startup, or you are planning to do that?
I am building a venture with one of my friends, Balaji Rao. So it's called Founder Hunt. So we want to solve the problem for people to meet their co-founders. So in India, we have a lot of nascent kickstarting talent available, but we are not able to channel it.
Hmm.
So people really struggle to find a founding team, and we leave it to luck. We want to eliminate the luck factor, and we want to make it a more streamlined pipeline for people to meet their co-founders.
Right. So, using Founder Hunt, first you can find your co-founders for your own startup, and using Grad Capital, you can basically get the funding. So it's properly streamlined, I guess.
Yes, it is. It is absolutely.
Right. The next question would be about what is open source.
All right. So open source is earlier software used to be under the bounds where because internet did exist as freely as it is doing now.
Yeah.
Then the Linus Torvalds, some kernel maintainers, they came up, they invented Git. Then the software hosting sites came up for you to share your software. So we can think of open source as an analogy to a peer-to-peer code sharing network. So that's what my understanding of open source is, that everyone can come, everyone can see what's happening behind the works.
Hmm.
You can freely see code, and best part is you're freely able to contribute to cutting edge science
Hmm.
happening in tech. For example, if you look at Google Maps APIs,
Hmm.
anyone can contribute to Google Maps APIs, and there's a good chance that whatever code you contribute will be able to ship onto Google's product someday. Hell,
Exactly.
you can even get featured on Google I/O for that if you make a good PR.
Hmm.
So open source is a great equalizer, and if I had to summarize open source in one sentence, it is an ocean of opportunities.
Correct, correct. So even I have heard from one of my acquaintances that he is not really very good at DSA, but he is really good at open source. Like, he has been contributing to open source for over, I guess, 2 or 3 years now, and he is like participating in GSoC for the second time. Like, he got selected second time, and now he has also got offers from companies like HackerRank, just on the basis of his open source contributions. So I guess it's also another way of getting a good job, I would say. I mean, as you said, it's an ocean of opportunities. So in my opinion also, open source is like something which you can freely contribute to, you can freely look at it, and if you have some idea, you can implement it as well. So there is no foundation from your side or from the company side. And obviously, if something is there which you can add to an already good product, so it just enhances the performance. So I mean, unity in strength, right? So anyone can contribute. So we are united as people, as developers, who can contribute to building something good, I guess. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to supplement on your point, you can literally build a community around your product,
Hmm.
irrespective whether you plan to monetize it or not. But you can still build a very strong community of like-minded folks,
True.
which will propel your personal growth as well as their personal growth together.
Hmm.
Because as you just said, we need to unity is much better for learning.
Exactly. So and how did your open source journey start?
Yes, so I had just finished my first year, and I got to know about open source. So I had been doing GitHub since a while, Git and GitHub. I'd been using it for personal projects, but I didn't really know that okay, you're allowed to venture out of your profile and contribute to other people's projects. So I distinctly remember I was working on a compiler for code executions.
Hmm.
So I was building an online judge like we have for Code Chef and
Hmm.
HackerRank and Lead Code. So I saw a lot of open source repositories. specifically from IIT Mandi, and I started making some PRs. Then I saw that I was able to do it quite well. I liked doing it because it every day taught me new things, and I was able to meet new people,
Hmm.
mostly maintainers,
Yeah.
people who are project administrators. I was able to interact with them, gain a lot of knowledge out of it. So I got into it highly that, okay, this is something cool. Then my first major open source experience came when I was the program lead for Script Minter of Code, where we had 247 projects, including two GSoC projects
Okay.
and GSoC organizations,
Hmm.
and about 1000 mentees. So understanding and structuring the whole pipeline for people to learn
Hmm.
was a role which people had mentored me to understand
Hmm.
that this is how it runs. And that was my first scratch with open source, if I may say. And then I applied for season of KDE in December, where I worked for Calamairs, which is a Linux distro installer,
Okay.
mainly pumping the Python versions up a bit and writing documentation. So and then actually I applied for GSoC in my first year as well. I applied to INCF. I
Okay.
couldn't make it because I didn't have that amount of experience in my first year. And this year, when I started preparing, I had decided that I want to clear GSoC at any cost because I had known about GSoC since my first year, like even before I started college. That I
Right.
thought कि hey यार ये Google का program है.
Hmm.
This is a cool thing when you can work on things you like.
Right.
खोडना है.
And
So I was
obviously
like,
get a
cool,
Google
let's do
branding
this.
as well.
Yes, and get the Google branding.
Yeah.
But honestly, for me, the cooler part was working on cool things. So
Hmm.
I've always been very attuned to astronomy. So even in my undergraduate days, I had worked with a COEP Swayam, which
Okay.
was the first student satellite launched by India. So I was the only one who was selected among 16 people all across the country to work with them.
Wow.
So since then, I decided that I want to work in astronomy.
Hmm.
So I looked up all the organizations related to space, like aerospace research, Livre Space, Polio Astro, and Open Astronomy. So I decided that I want to contribute to Open Astronomy because it's cool and it's something which is I like.
Oh.
So currently I'm contributing there.
Hmm.
So that's where my proposal got accepted. I mean, that's the only place I applied to.
Okay. That's great. So, could you give up a brief up about your project? Like, what is it about, and what technologies or programming languages have you used in it?
Yep. So my project is called DAVE, which is a data analysis of variable events.
Okay.
So it is a child project of Stingray. Stingray is a library in Python, which is used mainly for Fourier analysis and spectral analysis of X-rays. So time series analysis is performed extensively using Stingray. So Stingray was a CLI interface mainly able to run in Jupyter notebooks. So the maintainers thought, hey, it would be cool if we just have a GUI made. It's easy for users. You can ship it out either as a flat pack or as a exe file
Hmm.
or in a snap package. So currently I'm building that. So my front end is powered by Electron.js
Hmm.
and the backend is in Python. So the project had all the dependencies and features broken down due to a lot of fast changes, mainly due to Python, because Stingray extensively uses AstroPy.
Okay.
AstroPy recently got a 4.2 update, and we guys are still stuck on 1.8.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we wanted to bump things up, add a couple of new features which I've covered in my proposal,
Hmm.
and it will mainly be a GUI where you can just directly feed your CSV or a JSON file and get a time series analysis, a timestamp of each event which has occurred in the past of your journey
Hmm.
of the journey of the wave you are analyzing via GUI.
That sounds pretty interesting.
It is a nice project to work on, I
Yeah, yeah,
might say.
absolutely. Now even I feel like maybe I could have explored it more instead of just focusing on my placements. But I guess in final year your priority is more on to, I mean, more about placement. So I guess it's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How do you figure out your organization or the project that you want to work on? So like how
Hmm.
do you explore that?
So for this, I used a three-step framework.
Mm-hmm.
So firstly, I configured my why.
Okay.
So why do I want to do GSoC?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's interesting, it's fun, and you are getting to work on things you normally wouldn't. So once you figure out your why, you get your what. So the what part is the critical part. So when you're selecting an organization, there are two very critical factors. Firstly is your liking. For example, I had always been towards astronomy.
Mm-hmm.
You might be towards finance. Some other person might be towards compilers.
Yeah, yeah.
So firstly is figuring out your interests. So I would give interest precedence over anything when you're preparing for GSoC,
Mm-hmm.
because at the end your goal is to learn, not get selected. All right. So you figure out your interest. Second, when you figure out your interest, then you further divide the organizations into subcategories. Organizations which are into your tech stack and field of interest, then organizations which are not in your tech stack but in your field of interest.
Right.
So uh, then we go to, mainly I would suggest everyone to go with the first choice, since if it's your tech stack you're familiar with, it boosts your chances of selection and makes your process easier.
Exactly.
Then make a list. There are a lot of amazing tools available for you to analyze projects as well. So there's a tool called as GSoC Analyzer,
Mhm.
made by Sparsh from IIT Roorkee. So it gives you analysis of everything a year on year for number of slots, number of projects, and the tech stack. So you decide your tech stack, then comes the project part. So since you have understood your tech stack, you have understood the idea of the organization, then selecting a project is relatively easy, since you at least have a high level understanding of what's it going to be with you. Then you just select a project based on your interest and liking, and of course number of people contributing if you're really trying to get serious,
Yeah, yeah.
and you start contributing. That's roughly the frameworks to follow.
Hmm. Yeah, obviously the number of participants for that particular project is, important figure, because one of my friend who got selected this year, so in his project only two people had basically given the application proposal. So obviously he had proper 50% chance, right? And he got selected. So obviously if the number of participants are less in a particular project, so you might want to focus on that if you really want to be selected in it. So that's
Hmm.
definitely one factor, and obviously interest has to be one of the biggest factors for choosing your organization and project.
And one thing I would like to add is that your proposal making is a secondary factor. Your organization selection is the most important card in your hand, because I would really recommend people to spend at least a month or two on selecting the organizations, rather than just rushing headfirst into selecting something they like, because at times what we like and what we want might differ. So selecting the organization is of paramount importance for your selection.
Right. When do you start preparing for GSoC, or basically contributing for GSoC?
Yep. So preparing for GSoC, well, you can contribute to open source anytime.
Anytime.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
yes. So I would recommend anyone to just get started with open source, because you can learn a lot and you will discover a lot more organizations and knowledge along the way. But if you are really thinking from a GSoC point of view,
Yes.
if you want to start super early, August or September is the best time for you to start super early. You have about 6 to 7 months of runway, which is a very good time for you to prepare. And the organizations just have finished their GSoC. So the mentors are looking to onboard new contributors, and the prior GSoC students can also mentor you,
Mhm.
help you to succeed. And if you're aiming to, still prepare with a moderate amount of time, then December to January would be the best time to prepare, since normally, since after the program is changed, in February the organizations are announced. So since February till April, you roughly have about 1.5 to 2 months for your proposal making. But those 2 months are like very critical. If you figure out your strategy early on about your organization, then those 2 months would pass very
Mhm.
smoothly.
Mhm. Correct. What's
Uh,
your opinion about overall connecting with the mentor?
Yes. So, well, you of course need to connect with the mentor professionally. You need to have very clear communication skills that if you are sending in a pull request, you need to outline what exactly will the pull request be doing.
Yeah.
Ambiguity is frowned upon a
Mm.
bit,
Mm.
because, yes, of course, while learning, you will make mistakes, but you need to learn fast, because in when you're communicating with your mentors, you won't be speaking with them in person. So
Mm.
you need to have very clear thought process of what you're thinking. So communication is of paramount importance.
Right. So ultimately, do you have any tips that you personally followed and were, really helpful in your process?
I would say be persistent and be ruthlessly persistent. That's all I would say, because in GSoC it's not a sprint,
Mm-hmm.
it's a marathon. So your selection is not based on if you can make how many pull requests a day. It's
Mm-hmm.
about how many pull requests a day gets merged, and at the end of the day, are you adding value to the organization?
Exactly.
Are you adding? Are you a USP to the organization that they might want to select you over the other participants? So consistency is very important. Communication has to be clear. If you don't have skills, it's all right, but you need to love what you do.
Mm.
I mean, if you love what you do, you will really see that even if you don't get selected for GSoC, you will see you have grown as a person, you have grown as a developer, and at the end of the day, Google Summer of Code is just a program.
Right.
What you bring to the table as a person is more important.
Absolutely. And also, the number of pull requests does not really matter, in my opinion. The impact that a single pull request creates, I guess that matters the most.
Absolutely. So your pull requests have to be more of quality over
Yeah.
quantity.
Exactly.
So you cannot send 20 pull requests out of which one is merged,
Hmm.
because the rest of the pull requests would be treated as spam or useful pull requests by the mentors. But if you send in only 5 pull requests, out of which 4 are merged and one is a high priority pull request, you
Hmm.
automatically get a lead in front of the other competitors, because, as I said earlier, you are able to add value to the organization, and you are able to commit that you will be able to learn things on the fly and deliver things. So it gives you a positive image, and it boosts your confidence too alongside, because no one wants to see a closed pull request. Everyone
Hmm.
wants to see a merged pull request.
Right. Absolutely. So, anything else that you want to basically summarize or basically tell yourself regarding GSoC?
Yes, I mean, if I would have to tell something to myself last year, I would probably say that preparing for GSoC is a lot more beautiful than the selection,
Mm-hmm.
because the amount of things you learn, the the things you need to learn, your strategy, you need to manage your time, you need to develop your communication skills, you need to learn things, you need to have research before making a proposal.
Mm-hmm.
So the preparation part is a lot more fun. That's one thing. And secondly, even if you're not selected, it doesn't matter. There are a lot of programs coming up. There's Outreachy, there's the MHL Fellowship,
M&A. Yeah, yeah.
there's Google Summer of Docs. There is the Linux Foundation mentorship programs which roll out all throughout the year,
Hmm.
and there are a lot of small programs coming up. So even if you're not selected in your maiden attempt, you definitely stand a chance to apply for it next year and do it.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, the main point is that at the end of the day, you have learned something. You are growing in general. So I guess that's the main win for you, even if you don't get selected. And obviously, you will be having a
Exactly.
lot of other opportunities as well. So never be too upset about things. You will always have something new upcoming. So I guess that completely summarizes the whole GSoC process and all the preparation strategies, etc. And guys, if you want the proposal of Rachit, so we can share the link in the description.
So if you want to get a detailed video on proposal making, please subscribe to Sahaj's channel and comment below. You can also reach out to me, but we would be covering this in a coming edition of the GSoC series. So stay tuned for that.
Right, absolutely. So again, could you just give a brief up about what Google Season of Docs is?
So in 2019, Google's open source office developed saw a discrepancy in open source that people are not able to get a lot of documentations. I mean, all of us here might be agreeing that we have looked up on Stack Overflow for answers to our questions more times than the official documentation.
Right.
This is because a lot of times documentation is either outdated or it doesn't exist. So Google's OSS, which is the open source office, wanted to solve this problem, and they thought of creating Google Summer of Docs. So in Google Summer of Docs, you are a technical writer where you write documentation for these open source organizations and you get paid for it. So it's similar to GSoC, but you make documentation here. So you code your coding is negligible unless you're working with something like Sphinx, where you might need to get the installation done, run the APIs on your modules. So, and it pays a stipend similar to GSoC as well.
Basically, GSoD is technical writing, I would say, in concise way.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
So, did you follow anything in particular to basically prepare for it?
No, I didn't follow anything particularly because since when I worked with the season of KDE under KDE, so I wrote a lot of documentation for Calamares. Since then, I had understood about documentation and its importance. So that was one thing I had followed. So until last year, you had to make a proposal for GSoD as well. But for this year onwards, Google made the process completely autonomous for organizations. So organizations can decide which writer they want to hire. So I was selected for two organizations, which is OpenMRS and the Stellar Group, which is a subsidiary of HPX, which is a high performance computing library of C++, where I'm doing my GSoD. So mostly it depends from org to org. This year, Google had made a statement of interest mandatory. So a statement of interest is roughly like a proposal. However, again, it differs from org to org. Some orgs may ask you to send in your samples. Some orgs may just interview you based on your resume, or some orgs may give you some assignment, and based on your assignment, you might get selected. So that's roughly how the process is looking like this year. Again, the process might change since it's a relatively new program. So for that, we would need to wait.
So it's nothing fixed as of now. It completely depends from organization to organization.
Yes, absolutely. So for me, for HPX, I had to send in a statement of interest, and I had to send in some prior works along with my CV. Alongside, I had to explain that why I want to do this, which was the most important part, because they see your motivation. rather than your skills.
Hmm.
So that was how I applied for HPX. And for OpenMRS, I had to first send in my statement of interest, and then I had an interview with the community leaders and the documentation lead, where they interviewed me on my prior experience and again my motivation for doing this. And I had received a selection from both these organizations, but ultimately I decided to go with HPX.
Yeah, so what's the reason behind that?
Yeah. So for HPX, it is like for OpenMRS, I had to create 2 to 3 getting started guides, which I initially wanted to do. But then for HPX, I had to correlate docs from the prior GSoC projects and prior old documentation correlated to one place. So it was more resource extensive, but I liked it because it is related to C++. So I am a ardent C++ user myself. So and I also take part in competitive programming occasionally. So
Okay.
I thought that this is a lot more relatable to what I do, and I can learn a lot more in the process.
Hmm.
So I saw a better ROI in terms of the learning curve. So I applied for HPX.
Okay, that's great. How much importance being technically sound, plays a role in this GSoD?
Yes. Again, this depends from your project to project. What are the end goals of the project? But yes, in a broader sense of view, you stand a better chance of getting selected for GSoD.
Hmm.
If you're even if you're not as technically sound as you might need for GSoC, since you will be creating documentation, you would be looking at a lot of code, or you need to be able to read and interpret code well enough. So even if you are not able to code well enough, you can absolutely just read code well enough and understand how things work behind the doors. Then yes, I mean, if you're not that sound, you still stand a very good chance. And if even if you're not technically sound, or to add, you stand a chance for both GSoC and GSoD if you're persistent enough.
Hmm. Okay. So, when you apply for GSoC, right? So you basically have to do open source contributions in that particular project for that particular organization. So what do we have to do for GSoD? Like, is there a
Yes.
similar process that you have to contribute into technical writing for a particular project or
Yes.
organization?
So some organizations have a mandatory rule for making some docs
Hmm.
as a pre-interview or a pre-hiring role.
Hmm.
So some orgs have that mandatory, but some orgs just have it that you can contribute. Of course, you should contribute. That's what I would recommend. I contributed during my application phase. So, but there's no hard and fast rule like GSoC that you need to contribute. However, you need to have a sound understanding, as we just mentioned, that at least you need to know the best practices and write documentation in terms of explain it to new users who
Hmm.
are getting started from 0 to 1. So that's a very important skill.
Right. And now talking about the stipends, right? So there is a considerable difference between the two stipends that you get from GSoC and GSoT. So any reason why there is such a gap between the two things?
Yes.
Like in my opinion, when I had seen the stipends of both the programs, so I was expecting more from GSoC, like the stipend to be more from for GSoC, whereas it turned out to be completely opposite. So any reason that might be there for this gap?
So one of the reasons is that a GSoC is administered directly by Google,
Mhm.
including funding and slot administration and everything. So end to end, it's administered by Google for the proposal phase. And only thing which is in the mentor's hands is the project acceptance. So not even the slots are in the mentor's hands. So that's why it has a lower amount for a student,
Mm-hmm.
but it's fixed.
Okay.
But for GSoD, it is highly variable. So since this year GSoD had each organization give open source office give them a budget.
Okay.
So how you want to spend that was up to the organization. So since then there is a variable pay to each organization. It might be more for some and less for some. So that is one of the main reasons.
Do you have anything in particular that you would like to suggest from your own side that I have not covered in my questions for GSOD?
One thing that I would like to add is that people might want to, if you're trying to get started with GSOD prep, is to write documentation and read documentation,
Hmm.
which would be a good starting point
Right.
because the intent really needs a lot of better documentation and Stack Overflow.
Hmm. Okay. So I guess we can call it a day now, and I guess everyone who is watching this whole podcast session or this whole video has got to know a lot about GSoC, GSoD. So thanks everyone for watching this video. I hope to bring more such content, and if you really want it, so just give a thumbs up to this video if you have liked this, and just subscribe to the channel to get aware about more such of videos, and just hit the bell notifications. Thank you everyone.